Close your mouth and hum a single low note, right now, for as long as one breath lasts. Somewhere behind your cheekbones, in hollow spaces you almost never think about, the air just changed. The humming you did for 4 seconds pushed the gas exchange in your sinuses roughly 15-fold higher than it sits when you breathe silently. That is the measured answer, and it comes from a molecule your body makes on purpose called nitric oxide. But knowing the number is close to useless, because almost everyone who hears it starts humming constantly and gets nothing. And the reason they get nothing is a timing problem nobody explains. The gas only reaches your lungs if the air is moving the right way at the moment you make the sound. Here is what most people picture when they think of a sinus. They imagine a clogged pipe, something to be drained. That picture is wrong, and it is wrong in a way that costs you. Your paranasal sinuses, 4 paired air pockets carved into the bone of your face, the maxillary under your eyes, the frontal above your brows, the ethmoid between your eyes, the sphenoid deep behind your nose, are not drainpipes. They are chemical factories, and the main thing they manufacture, quietly, every hour of your life, is nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a gas. 1 nitrogen atom, 1 oxygen atom, so unstable it survives only a few seconds before it reacts with something. For most of the 20th century, chemists filed it under pollution, the brown haze off a car exhaust, a thing that came out of engines. Then in 1998, the Nobel Prize in Medicine went to 3 researchers, Robert Furchgott, Louis Ignarro, and Murad, for proving that your own cells make this same gas deliberately and use it as a signal. The molecule that fouls the air over a city is the same molecule that widens your blood vessels. Your body took an exhaust fume and turned it into a messenger. So where does humming come in? The lining of your sinuses is one of the richest sources of nitric oxide in the entire body. It sits there in that trapped pocket of air, accumulating. And in 2002, a research group at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, Weitzberg and Lundberg, the 2 names most associated with this work, had people hum and measured what came out of the nose. Humming raised nasal nitric oxide roughly 15 times over quiet breathing. 15-fold. From a sound you can make with your lips shut. Why would a sound do that? Because of what sound actually is. A hum is not a mystical vibration. It is a pressure wave, air molecules crowding together and spreading apart, hundreds of times a second. When you hum at a normal male pitch, around 130 times a second, you are pushing on the air inside those sinus pockets 130 times every second. And that shoving does something specific. It stirs the trapped, nitric oxide-rich air in the sinus and flushes it out through the tiny openings, the ostia, that connect each sinus to your nasal passage. Which raises the obvious next question. If the gas is just sitting in there, why doesn't it come out on its own? Picture a narrow-necked bottle, half full of smoke, sitting on a shelf. Leave it alone, and the smoke barely creeps out the neck. The opening is small, the air is still, nothing moves. Now tap the bottle rhythmically, fast, over and over. The smoke rolls and tumbles and pours out the neck in seconds. Your sinus is that bottle. The ostium, the drainage hole, is the neck, and it is genuinely tiny, 1 to 3 millimeters across. Silent breathing taps the bottle almost not at all. Humming taps it 130 times a second. That is the whole mechanism in one image, and it predicts something useful. A sinus whose neck is swollen shut won't release its gas no matter how hard you hum. Hold on to that, it becomes the entire point later. Now, what is the nitric oxide for, once it's flushed out? This is where the story stops being a curiosity and starts being something you'd actually want. 3 jobs, and each one matters at a different hour of your day. First, nitric oxide is antimicrobial. It is toxic to bacteria, to fungi, and it interferes directly with viruses trying to replicate in your nasal lining. Your sinuses are essentially fumigating themselves. Second, it is a vasodilator. It relaxes the smooth muscle wrapped around your blood vessels, opening them wider. Third, and this is the one almost nobody connects, the nitric oxide you make in your nose travels down with each breath into your lungs, and there it opens the small airways and helps match blood flow to the parts of the lung that are actually holding air. Let me stay on that third job, because it's the strangest and the best evidenced. There's a phrase in the respiratory literature: your nose is the first part of your lung. Nitric oxide made up in your sinuses gets inhaled downward and improves the efficiency of oxygen pickup in the lungs. This is measurable. People who breathe in through the nose, unhurried, oxygenate their blood slightly better than people mouth-breathing the identical air. Same room, same oxygen, different route. The gas you manufacture in your face is a performance additive for the air you're already breathing. And here's the recognition beat. If you've ever noticed that breathing through your nose during a walk feels steadier, less ragged, than gulping through your mouth, that's not in your head. You are dosing yourself. But this is only half the mechanism. Because knowing that humming releases the gas tells you nothing about whether the gas gets anywhere useful. And that is exactly where the 90 seconds, and the way you spend them, decides everything. So why do so many people hum and feel nothing? Here's the timing problem I promised. Nitric oxide flushed out of your sinuses does you the most good when it's inhaled, carried down into the lungs, or held in the nasal passage where it can work on the tissue. But most people hum on the exhale. They breathe in, then hum the air out, and the gas they just liberated goes straight out the front of the nose and into the room. They manufactured it, released it, and threw it away. The fix is almost stupidly simple, and I'll give it to you in full shortly. But the principle is this. You want to release the gas, then breathe it in, not release it and blow it out. Get that backwards and 90 seconds of humming does close to nothing. Which raises a harder question. If it's that easy to do wrong, how do you do it right? Precisely, breath by breath. Let's build the protocol, and I'll be specific enough that you can do it while you listen. Sit upright, not military straight, just tall enough that your chest isn't collapsed onto your stomach, because a slumped chest shortens every breath you're about to take. Close your mouth. Breathe in slowly through your nose to a comfortable 3/4 full. Not a desperate gulp. About 4 seconds of gentle inhale. Now hum, lips closed, a low steady note, for the length of the exhale. 5 to 6 seconds is plenty. You should feel a faint buzz in the bones of your face, somewhere around the cheeks and the bridge of the nose. That buzz is the pressure wave doing its work on the sinus air. When the hum runs out, don't gasp. Let the next inhale come slow and through the nose, so that the freshly stirred, nitric oxide-rich air in your nasal passage gets drawn back inward instead of lost. One hum, one slow nasal inhale. That's one cycle. Do about 10 of them, and you've spent roughly 90 seconds. If even that one correction, inhale slow through the nose after the hum, don't blow it out, was new to you, hit like. It's the single signal that tells the algorithm to show this to someone else who's been humming into the void and wondering why nothing changed. Now, a detail that changes the results, and it's about pitch. Not every hum stirs every sinus equally. Sound resonates, meaning at certain frequencies, a given air pocket vibrates far more than at others, the same way a wine glass rings at one specific note and stays silent at the rest. Your sinuses each have their own rough resonant range depending on their size and the width of that little ostium, which is why a single droning note is less effective than a hum that slides gently up and down through a range of pitches. Slide low to a little higher and back, slowly, across each hum. You're scanning for the frequency that lights up each pocket, instead of hammering one note that might miss 3 of the 4. Try it on your next cycle. Hum a note, then bend it upward, and notice where the buzz in your face moves. It does move. That movement is you tuning into a different chamber. And here's a point where I have to be straight with you, because this is where a lot of health content oversells. You may have seen the claim that humming gives you a 15-fold increase in nitric oxide, and therefore 15 times the benefit, as if the number transfers straight into how much better you'll feel. It doesn't. The 15-fold figure from the Karolinska work is real, and it's been replicated, but it measures the concentration of gas coming out of the nose in that moment, not a 15-fold improvement in sinus health, not 15 times fewer infections, nothing like that. The gas is potent and it's short-lived, and most of the effect is local and temporary. Humming is a genuine, cheap, evidence-backed way to move air and gas through stubborn sinuses. It is not a 15-fold cure for anything. I'd rather you trust the smaller true claim than chase the inflated one. If that distinction just landed for you, the difference between a real mechanism and an inflated promise, and I'll tell you now there's a layer coming about why some people's sinuses stay silent no matter how well they hum. Subscribe now, because that section is a few minutes off, and it's the reason I bothered making this at all. So let's go there. Why does the whole system fail in some people? Go back to the bottle with the narrow neck. The entire mechanism depends on that neck, the ostium, being open. The nitric oxide can be sitting in the sinus in perfect abundance, and you can hum with flawless technique, and if that 1 to 3 millimeter opening is swollen shut, nothing comes out. This is the hidden layer. Chronic sinus trouble is very often not a problem of too little gas or too little vibration. It's a plumbing problem at the neck of the bottle. The tissue around the ostium is inflamed, the opening narrows, and the sinus becomes a sealed pocket. And now something genuinely unpleasant happens, and it explains the whole cycle people get trapped in. Remember that nitric oxide is antimicrobial. It keeps the sinus sterile. When the ostium seals shut, the gas can't circulate. The sinus stops fumigating itself, and bacteria that were held in check start to multiply in that warm, wet, sealed pocket. The infection causes more swelling. More swelling narrows the ostium further. Less gas escapes. Fewer microbes are killed. The infection worsens. It's a loop that feeds itself. A sealed room where the ventilation broke, and now the air is going bad, and the bad air is what's keeping the door jammed. This is why chronic sinusitis is so stubborn. The very gas that would help can't reach the place that needs it, because the door to that place is what's swollen. So does humming break that loop or not? Honest answer, it depends on how far gone the neck is. If the ostium is merely a bit swollen, from a cold, from dry air, from the tail end of an allergy flare, then the gentle, repeated pressure of humming, combined with the vasodilating nitric oxide reaching the tissue, can genuinely help nudge that opening back toward open, and you feel a sinus release, sometimes within a single session. If the ostium is fully sealed by an established infection or by structural narrowing, humming won't force it, and no amount of buzzing will fix a blockage that needs medical attention. Depending on which sinus doctor you ask, this is either a reason to hum daily as prevention or a reason not to expect miracles once things are bad. Both camps are partly right. The truth is that humming is a maintenance tool, not a rescue tool, best used on a healthy or slightly congested nose to keep the necks of those bottles open, so they never seal in the first place. There's a piece of engineering here worth borrowing, because it makes the whole thing click. In fluid systems, think of the pipes in a building, or a ventilation duct. Engineers know that the resistance to flow through an opening doesn't drop off gently as the opening narrows. It collapses catastrophically. Flow through a tube scales with the radius to the fourth power. Halve the width of the opening, and you don't have the flow. You cut it to a 16th. That fourth power law is why your sinus can feel completely fine one day, and utterly blocked the next, after only a small amount of extra swelling. The ostium didn't close a little. A little closing was enough to nearly stop the flow entirely. This is not a slow slide. It's a cliff edge, and it's why catching congestion early, while the neck is only slightly narrowed, matters so much more than the mild symptoms would suggest. Let me name the other players in this, because they matter, and almost no one connects them. The nitric oxide story doesn't stop at your sinuses. The same molecule, made by the lining of your blood vessels, the endothelium, the single-cell layer coating the inside of every artery you own, is what keeps those arteries relaxed and open. This is the connection to blood pressure, and it's why dietary nitrate, from beetroot, from leafy greens like spinach and rocket, gets converted by bacteria on your tongue into nitrite, and then into nitric oxide in your body. There's a real link here. The bacteria living on the back of your tongue are part of your nitric oxide supply chain, which is one reason the aggressive use of antibacterial mouthwash has been shown, in several studies, to modestly raise blood pressure. It kills the bacteria you need to make the gas. That's the honest state of it. Mouthwash isn't poison, but wiping out your oral bacteria has a cost most people never hear about. So the map looks like this now. Nitrate from your food, bacteria on your tongue, the endothelium in your arteries, the epithelium in your sinuses, the small airways in your lungs, all of them trading in the same two-atom gas, nitric oxide, the fume that became a messenger. Humming is simply the one lever in that whole system you can pull instantly, for free, with your mouth shut, right where you're sitting. Which brings me back to the 90 seconds and what they're actually for. Do this in the morning, and here's the reasoning, not just the instruction. When you wake, your sinuses have spent the whole night mostly still. You were lying flat, breathing shallow, gas pooling in those pockets, mucus thickening in the dry overnight air. Morning is when the ostia are most likely to be a little swollen, and the sinuses most stagnant. 90 seconds of slow, pitch-sliding humming, first thing, does the work that a still night couldn't. It stirs the pooled gas, sends the vasodilator into the swollen tissue around each ostium, and flushes the chambers before the day's air and allergens arrive. You're not treating a disease, you're doing the maintenance the night left undone. And there's a quieter benefit riding along with all of this, one that has nothing to do with sinuses at all. When you hum on a long, slow exhale, you are lengthening your outbreath, and a long exhale is the single most direct switch you have for your parasympathetic nervous system, the branch that runs your body's rest and recover mode, carried largely by the vagus nerve that wanders from your brainstem down through your chest and gut. The vibration of humming stimulates that nerve where it passes near the throat, so the same 90 seconds that ventilate your sinuses also, measurably, slow your heart rate and drop you a notch toward calm. You reached for a sinus tool and got a nervous system tool in the same breath. That's not a bonus I'm inventing to pad the case. It's the reason humming and chanting show up in so many old breathing traditions that had no idea nitric oxide existed. They found the effect by feel, centuries before anyone could measure the gas. I'll be honest about the limits of what I've told you. The nitric oxide flushing is well measured. The 15-fold figure is solid. The vagal, calming effect of long exhales is well established too. What's less certain, where the research is thinner, and I won't pretend otherwise, is exactly how much daily humming changes the long-run rate of sinus infections in an average person. Nobody has run the large, years-long trial that would settle it. What we have is a clear, replicated mechanism and a lot of reasonable inference. That's enough for me to hum every morning, because it costs nothing, and the downside is zero. It may not be enough for you, and that's a fair place to land. Here's the whole thing in one line you could hand to anyone. Your sinuses make a healing gas all night. Humming is how you stir it loose in the morning, and you must breathe it back in rather than blow it out. Tell me in the comments, when you hum right now and slide the pitch up and down, where in your face do you feel the buzz move? Everyone's is slightly different, and I genuinely want to see the range. And share this with the one person you know who reaches for a nasal spray every single morning and has never once been told their own face makes something better for free. Tomorrow, before you check your phone, before the coffee, 90 seconds. Mouth shut, note low, breathe it back in. Your face has been making the medicine your whole life. All you have to do is stir it.